How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up macOS Sonoma on a vintage Mac. Vintage is the word that Apple uses to explain out-of-date hardware that they are no longer sending updates to. So I've got a mid-2013 Mac Pro. It's the trash can looking computer. So it's cylindrical. I actually kind of like how it looks. It looks like Captain Phasma's armor from Star Wars, if you know who that is. And so the reason I'm doing this is not just for fun and for learning purposes, but me and a good friend of mine, Command B, by the way, is his name. Check out his YouTube channel in the description. We're working on an iOS app, and neither of us have ever developed an iOS app before. So we are learning as we go. And one of the things that we learned, and I learned, I didn't know before, was that you really can't develop iOS applications on other platforms, meaning outside of Mac OS. And so, because I did a lot of research on this, I looked into running Mac OS in a VM. I looked into Kotlin. I looked into different tools that claim to give you the ability to do this, but ultimately, at some point in the process, it seems like you need Xcode. So I was like, awesome, I've got a macOS VM. I forgot what it was running. It wasn't Sonoma. And I could do this in the VM. So I go into the VM, I try to download Xcode, and it says that Xcode is not supported. So I'm like, okay, I go on my journey to find macOS, something that would get macOS Sonoma running without me having to go and buy brand new Apple hardware. Because right now I don't want to go buy brand new Apple hardware. If I would, it would be the new iPad. I did just recently get the iPhone 15. So, you know, I'm just going to take a break on my wallet with Apple right now. Apple, I love y'all, but you be taking my money, a lot of my money. And it's good stuff, though. I like your technology. It's awesome. But so I had a buddy give me this Mac Pro, and I figured, is there a way? There's got to be a way, because my IT brain kicked into gear, and having worked with Linux, having done installs, having done some funky stuff with computers, it got me thinking how there's got to be a way. So as I'm Googling, as I'm researching, I came across a project called OpenCore Legacy Patcher, which is a boot manager. And I am so glad I did, because OpenCore Legacy Patcher is what worked and got me going with my Mac Pro. I have got Sonoma, macOS Sonoma running stably on it. I've got Xcode installed successfully, and I'm going to show you some of those steps. I probably won't give you every little screen clip, but I'm going to give you just enough resources and guidance for you to be able to do this. I really think this project is something that could breathe life into some old Apple hardware. If you don't want to do a Linux OS, you could do Mac OS, the newest. At the time of this recording, which is May 2024, Mac OS Sonoma works fine on this, using on older hardware, Mac hardware, using OpenCore. So the first thing you're going to want to do is bookmark this website, and I'll put this in the description. This is the OpenCore Legacy Patcher documentation site. Bookmark that. You're gonna need that. You're also going to need a version of macOS running. So whether you're running it in a VM or you're doing it in AWS on their cloud instances, great. You're just going to need macOS to actually get OpenCore downloaded and set up, because what you're going to do, the other thing you need is you need a flash drive. I think it's at least 16 gigabytes. I would recommend, just to be safe, go 32 gigabytes. And you can go to Walmart or Amazon and you can get a drive for pretty cheap. So I would recommend, get one of these and then just be okay with reformatting it and deleting all the data on it if there is any on there, because you're going to use this on the hardware you want to put macOS Sonoma on. How do you know your hardware is supported by OpenCore? That's another big thing. you're going to want to go on this OpenCore site to supported models and just look through. So what I did is I looked at for the serial number on my Mac Pro, and I looked for the anything that indicated some type of serial number identifier, and I Googled it, and I found that my Mac Pro was this one, actually, late 2013. I was like, awesome. That means that it works, hopefully. And so, because I hadn't used it before, let's say you find out what model is running, or what model is supported, and you're like, yes, that's mine. Let's go. And the next thing you're going to do after that is you're going to download and build the macOS installer, right? And I'm showing you this documentation for a reason, because it helped me. There was only one thing that I had to do that was kind of weird, and I'll show you that when we get there. On the Mac, and I did this on my wife's MacBook Pro. It's a mid 2020, and I went to the GitHub and downloaded this OpenCore Patcher GUI app, downloaded that and launched it. And when you launch it, you get this view. You're going to want to create a macOS installer. But and here's the thing, I made what I thought was going to be a mistake. I went and I created the macOS installer, and what it did is it downloaded the OS, macOS image, and it gives you an option. So this is the exact screen you're going to get. Download macOS installer and pick macOS Sonoma. I thought I made a mistake. I'm going to go back and just give you this. I didn't go in here and click settings and change the model to my Mac Pro. And I thought that was going to mess me up, but it didn't. You want to do this before you do the build and install OpenCore, which is your third step after the Mac OS installer is done. So you're going to do that. It's going to take a while. It took me, I don't know how long, I didn't time it, but it took a while. Give it time to download it. And then once it's downloaded, that's when you're going to build and install OpenCore. So you click that build and install OpenCore button, and then but before that, hit settings and make sure you are selecting your model. So I have a few Mac minis and I have a few Mac computers in my house, which is, I feel blessed about that. They're older or vintage, but you may just be like, hey, I am building OpenCore. I'm using OpenCore on the machine that I want to put the new Mac OS on. You would not have to change the setting here. You only do that if you are building this installer for your flash drive on a Mac system that is not the system that you want the new Mac OS to be on. So then, and then it says it here. That's how I knew to do that, because it mentioned it in the warning on the documentation. Then you start building. That's another waiting process. This is where you're going to do the install. And this is where I had to do one slight different thing. So this is where you're going to plug in the flash drive that has been prepared with OpenCore Legacy Patcher into the Mac that you want Mac OS to be on. And be ready, do your data backups. If you have data on that machine that you want to save and preserve, back that up, whether it's to iCloud or to another external drive of some kind or a network share. And then put this in. When you boot up, you're going to want to hold the Option key if you have an Apple keyboard. But if it's Windows, you're going to want to hold Alt. And as that machine boots up, you're going to see a boot menu. This boot menu is going to give you options. You're going to pick EFI boot and then install, whatever the version is. In my case, it was MacOS Sonoma. And I clicked on that and something strange happened. It didn't show my hard drive. It only detected this flash drive. And I was like, what gives? Why is that happening? It was because prior to me putting Sonoma on that Mac, I actually had Linux running on it, which is an LVM partition. And I guess the the installer and the bootloader could not find that partition. It couldn't detect that volume for some reason. When you boot into the bootloader, at some point you get an option where you can see the bar at the top. And I went to open up terminal. Actually, you can go into recovery mode on Mac and open up terminal. And then I actually had to format the drive. So I'll show you what I pulled up. I was like, it took me 30 minutes to an hour of troubleshooting to figure out the command, but I did format macOS and from terminal, and there was an article that came up. I should have had this ready. Yeah, this one right here. There was an article that came up. Shout out to this thread on Stack Exchange, and I ran this command right here from the macOS terminal in that bootloader environment, and I guess the macOS installer environment, and I deleted the disks. But when you do that, like, it shows that in the documentation here as a sort of side point. Let's find that's right here. They're telling you here what to do. They're saying they're not, I mean, this is not the process I followed. It just, when I read this, it inspired me to, okay, I don't care about the data on this, so I deleted the entire drive. So when you go and you find terminal, you do the command disk util list, it'll show you all your drives. And this part is only if your macOS Sonoma installer, after you've prepared it with OpenCore Legacy Patcher, is not finding your internal hard drive. So I looked in here at each of these, and it's disk 0 was the one that was my internal drive. And so what I did is I looked at that drive identifier and I ran this command, but instead of what they got here in this thread, I did dev disk 0, and it deleted the partition. I then went into disk utility in macOS, and I went to I formatted that partition, and there's, that's also in that environment. So you would hit terminal here and hit exit terminal, and then go to disk utility and format the partition. And then I went back through and I did the same boot process. Well, actually, I didn't do the boot process. I just exited out of disk utility, clicked install macOS Sonoma, and the next thing was it showed that partition. Boom, installed it, and it successfully installed. Once macOS Sonoma came up, this was a step I almost skipped. I saw an OpenCore Legacy Patcher prompt. As soon as I was logged in and I created my new account, I got a prompt, and it was like, do you want to install to the drive? And I was just so excited to have gotten it working. I really didn't read the prompt, and I rebooted the machine at some point, and I had pulled the drive out, the flash drive, and it wasn't working. I was like, wait, hold on. It keep giving me this support error type of thing where it was saying it's not able to boot. So I'm like, okay, what happens if I plug it back in? So I plugged it back in, and it booted up successfully. So the boot manager, which was on here, was responsible for making sure that, the Mac knew what to boot off of. So that initial prompt that I got when I fresh installed macOS Sonoma and got in was for me to put the boot manager on the actual internal hard drive. So I went through that process. That took probably under a minute, click through that, and then boom. I don't need this being plugged in all the time now for this to boot off of macOS Sonoma. And so after that, I was able to download Xcode and get it working. I'll show you. I also enabled remote access and screen sharing. So I can, I'm going to essentially move this Mac Pro to my living room and put it on a shelf we got in there, connect it to my switch, my network switch I've got, and run it headless. So every time it boots up, I'll just use VNC on my Windows machine to connect into it and live stream and and share the development of this application that me and my buddy are creating. So I'll show you Xcode runs, and it's pretty snappy. I mean, it's the lag you're seeing is VNC, because I've got my screen up on the right here with the Mac directly connected via HDMI, and when I highlight and do that, it's immediate. So the delay is coming through VNC, but it's still not bad considering, you know. So Xcode works just fine, and that is how I got macOS Sonoma running on an older vintage Mac computer. I hope this has helped you. If you need help with this process, please comment below or jump into the Discord. I'm happy to try to help you with this. I really love this project. Shout out to the people developing OpenCore. Y'all are awesome. And, you know, this is a project that is breathing life into old Apple computers. Apple, if you're out there looking at this project like, hey, this is not great, please consider just allowing it to exist and continuing to let it exist, because it could drive sales of refurbished systems. I know Apple has a portion of their site where they are, you know, selling refurbed hardware, and you know, there's a lot of old hardware out there that it may not be in use. People may not be wanting to put Linux on there. They want to have their ecosystem. They want to have their iMessage. They want to have all those services that people in Apple's ecosystem have grown to love. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this. I hope it's helped you and maybe given you some inspiration and assistance. Keep learning.